Welcome back, everyone. So here I am. I'm Shia. So I'm your lecturer for management accounting. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to do part 2. Part 2 of that remaining topic. What remaining topic am I referring to? Process costing. Okay, I'm referring to process costing part 2. So that is the ending part of this topic. Okay, so now in this topic, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to cover the remaining portion which I didn't do the last time, and that is specifically relating to those situations involving opening work in progress. Okay, so this is actually a common issue for many questions and even at work. Now, to handle this opening work in progress, there are two approaches. Either it is based on weighted average cost, if not the first in first out method. Now note that these are actually supposed to have been covered in your earlier course of studies, but not to worry, because if you are very unsure about the concepts of the two, do let me know. I will walk you through again. Right? If not, otherwise, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to make the assumption that you have covered this and that you know what these two terms mean and how they work. Alright? Okay, so let me know again if you have any issues on that. So, how am I going to demonstrate the two methods? Okay? Now, the best way to show you how to do this is not to explain to you how exactly the steps are and so on to work out. The best way I find to explain to you how to apply these two is that we use an actual example. Alright? An actual example would be the clearest and most straightforward way to explain to you. Alright? Now, of course, in my example, I'm going to further explain to you how do we then use the weighted average and first in first out method to later help you determine valuation of your stocks. And not just stocks, I'm referring to finished goods stocks. And also, not forgetting, work in progress stocks. So the example will cover everything. Right? So it's a one example covering everything for you. Okay? So with this, I must also emphasize clearly that this will not include any of those recording of the double entry, which will be covered separately. Okay, my objective here is to explain to you how the calculation works. Right, you ready? Okay, very good. So let's go on to the example. Okay, a typical situation where you come across opening stock of work in progress, and it requires you to apply weighted average or first in first out. Such an example will probably look like this. Okay, probably, Okay, you are likely to see something like this, which says there are some opening work in progress, and this opening work in progress has two components: materials and some conversion costs. If you have forgotten, conversion costs may include direct labor and also production overheads. Okay? Now, according to my example, the materials input into this opening work in progress was 400, while conversion cost was 300. And in terms of materials, the opening work in progress is 100% complete, whereas in terms of conversion cost, it's only 60% complete. In total, physical units or physical number of kilos, my example, I'm using kilos, is 60 kilograms. Okay, my opening work in progress is 60 kilograms worth. Now, furthermore, during the period, okay, the production line people, they input additional materials and further some more conversion costs, right? And the value of this materials 2,000, conversion cost 1,006, and these work out to be about 300 kilograms. Okay, next, I also know that based on whatever that the factory has produced, they have actually completed and transferred 310 kilograms as finished goods. Now watch here, this 310 will include those who are in progress from last period, and then some that were started and completed. Okay, you get that? So if I'm going to explain to you this, okay, common sense here. If we started to have this work in progress at the beginning, 60 kilos, can I say that this 310 includes that 60 kilos? Agree? And this 310 also includes some of this 300. And how much of it? Okay, simple math, total is 310. So then the remaining here has to be 250 kilos. So this 250 kilos, part of it probably came from this 300. In fact, it is. So which means that the additional that we input in this period will still result in some closing work in progress. Do you see that? Right, because if out of the 300, only 250 were transferred as finished goods, that means we will still have at least 50 kilos of closing work in progress. And of course, this closing work in progress will have two components: the raw material component, which is 100% complete in my example, and conversion cost, which is only 30% complete. Okay? Now, with the example in place, I'm able to walk you through the how do we actually calculate the, in this case, the production cost and also the closing work in progress. In fact, I'm going to put down my requirement for my example. So in my example, I'm going to demonstrate for you how do we calculate the equivalent units. If you remember my part 1 example, I taught you equivalent units, but in my part 1 I didn't go through review with the opening work in progress. So now what I'm going to do is that for the equivalent unit calculation, I'm going to show you how it will work if we include the opening work in progress. Okay? So this is the first thing I'm going to demonstrate, the equivalent unit calculation using both the weighted average cost method and the first in first out methods. And next, I'm going to also demonstrate how do you find the equivalent unit, okay, or rather to be more correct, the cost per equivalent unit for raw material and also conversion cost. And for both methods, weighted average and also first in first out. Now you should also take note here that depending on which method that you use, whether it's weighted average or first in first out, that will also affect the cost per equivalent unit in terms of raw material and conversion cost. Okay, it might sound a bit hazy now, not to worry. As we come to the example, the calculation, you will see this a lot clearer. Okay? My ending part would be to also demonstrate to you how do we calculate the value of the finished goods and also to calculate the value of the closing work in progress. And this I'm going to demonstrate to you using both weighted average and first in first out methods. Alright, so there are plenty of calculations to do in my one example, and this is the only example which I'm going to use because it covers the main things I need to tell you. Okay, so take note of the data, and we're going to start with item 1. Okay, let's have a look. Now item 1. My item 1 is to calculate the equivalent units. Okay, so equivalent units, how am I going to calculate this? Okay, I'm going to start with the weighted average cost approach. Weighted average cost approach, equivalent units you have to calculate for both raw materials and also conversion costs. Okay, so let's begin. So for my opening work in progress, how much or how many equivalent units do I have for the opening work in progress of raw materials? Now, observe my example again. How many is it in terms of equivalent units? 60 kilograms, which is 100% complete in terms of raw material. So 100% times 60 kilos get you 60 here. Right, got it? Now let's go on to the next one, conversion cost. Now however, conversion cost is only 60% complete with regards to the 60 kilos. So what should the number here be? 60 kilos multiplied by 60%. And that will get you 36. Now, you may think that, should I include that? No, you don't. You still leave it as 60. Okay, for weighted average method, we don't really care about what's the percentage of completion. We don't really care about it. So as far as we are concerned, the opening work in progress will be completed in the period. So thus we'll take it as 60 kilos for both material and conversion cost. Right? Bear that in mind. We take it as 60 kilos because these will be continued to be complete and done in this period. Okay, in addition, I also found that I have started and completed some additional units. Now, how many did I start and complete? Okay, let's not look at the 60. The 60 I'm going to complete in this period. Now, those that I'm going to continue and complete in this period, do you remember this? Right, I have completed in total 310, out of which 60 is actually the opening work in progress. And the remaining 250 is what I'm referring to as start and complete in the period. So this will be 250 and 250. Now the complication comes when you approach the closing work in progress. Now, why? Now watch here. My closing work in progress is 50 kilos. It's 100% complete in terms of raw materials. Okay, so 100% times 50 will get you 50. Now this is the part that you watch for. In terms of conversion cost, it is only 30% complete. 30% complete, but this is referring to 50 kilos. So 30% of 50 kilos is completed in this period. You notice the difference. Earlier on, for my opening work in progress, I took it as 60. And I told you that my reasons for taking it as 60 is that I'm going to continue and complete in this period. So therefore it's 60. But for the 50 kilo in the closing work in progress, not all of them will be completed in this period. Only 30% is complete here. Then what about the remaining? Well, we'll continue to the next period. So this will work out to be 15. And which means that my total equivalent unit for materials would be 360. Right? 360. Whereas for equivalent unit conversion cost, that works out to be 325. Now, I emphasize here this is referring to total equivalent unit. Now, what about the first in first out approach? Okay, it's not any different. Okay, slightly different because first in first out requires you to differentiate between those that you started, from last period and those that you continued in this period. So some slight difference here. Okay. Now I'm going to have the same columns, equivalent unit materials and equivalent unit conversion cost. Same column. And watch carefully here. Right, I would like you to look at my example again. Right, think about this. If we talk about first in first out, and I mentioned to you that first in first out, we actually differentiate between what we did last period and what we are continuing this period. Okay, you get the logic, Watch here. My material was fully complete in the first place. So in terms of opening work in progress, there is nothing to continue with. Okay? But in terms of conversion cost, opening work in progress is only 60% complete, which means that it is short of 40%, and that 40% will be completed in this period. So 40% times 60 will get you 20. How much is that? 24. Agree? Right? 60% times 60 tells you that it's 24, and this 24 will continue to be worked on and completed in this period. Fine. Now, next thing. Those input and completed in this period. Okay, how many of them are there? If you remember this, out of 310 that were fully complete, 60 actually came from opening work in progress, but 250 were the actual ones that were started and completed this period. Okay, start and completed this period, which is how many kilograms is that? 250. And it's 250 for material and 250 for conversion cost. The last item. For the closing work in progress. Now, closing work in progress, the reasoning is going to be the same for first in, first out and weighted average. Why so? Now, observe here. Closing work in progress is 100% complete in terms of raw materials. So 100% times 50 gets you 50 kilos. Now, in terms of conversion cost, 30% complete, 30% times 50 kilos get you 15. And which means that in terms of total equivalent unit, we have 300 for raw material and we have 289 for conversion cost. Do you notice the contrast? It is somewhat quite different. Okay? Now, let's go on. Right, and have I completed the first item here? Have I completed my equivalent unit calculation? Yes, I did. I completed equivalent unit calculation for weighted average and first in, first out, which is this. Weighted average equivalent units and first in, first out equivalent units. Alright? You notice that compared with part 1, which I went through with you in the previous session, part 1 didn't have this opening work in progress. So this is where part 2 comes to the picture, because part 2 I'm going to explain to you how you address the opening work in progress. Fine? So that's part 1 addressed. Now let's come to part 2. Part 2 says to calculate cost per equivalent unit for raw material and conversion cost. And we're going to try to calculate that. Okay? But in order to find the cost per equivalent unit, you have to actually perform another calculation. That is, we need to perform a calculation on the costs incurred. Right? You need to have the cost in order to find the cost per equivalent unit. So this is a necessary step. Let's work on this. Now, same thing like the above workings, you have to divide this cost incurred into two segments. Right? The weighted average approach and the first in, first out approach. Now let's begin with weighted average. For weighted average, your opening work in progress will comprise of materials and conversion costs. So in terms of materials, what's the total material cost you incurred on your opening work in progress? Okay, is it provided to you earlier on in the example? Yes, it is. 400 and 300. Can you see that? Okay, all you need to do is just transfer it to the workings here. Furthermore, there is additional input. Okay. Now, if you remember the how weighted average works is that you have to add up all of the costs and then you divide by the total. Right? Okay, it's along the same lines. And you don't really care about what comes first and what comes last. Right? Now, what is the input cost for materials? 2,000. And then there is another 1,006 for conversion costs, and that works out to be total of $2,400 for materials and $1,900 for conversion costs. Now, for first in, first out, we again differentiate between what was done last period and what is done this period. Notice that weighted average, we don't really care about it. Okay, remember that now? So for first in, first out, the only number I'm interested in is what is the additional cost I've incurred in this period. And in this case, what is the additional cost I've incurred in this period? 2,000 and 1,006. Okay, that's fine. Do I need to care about the opening work in progress? No, I don't need to. Because the opening work in progress is the previous period. It's not relevant. Okay? Notice the contrast here? Okay, very good. Now with this costs available, now I'm able to calculate my cost per equivalent unit. Okay, how do I go about doing it? Okay, it's quite simple. Watch here. Now my material cost for weighted average is 2004. Okay, great. My equivalent unit for material is 360. Divide, what do you have? You find that it is $6.67 per equivalent unit. Okay, next one, conversion cost. My total conversion cost under weighted average is 1009. Now, in terms of equivalent unit, total equivalent unit for conversion cost is 325. Now, that works out to be $5.85 per equivalent unit. Okay? Right. Now, finally, as you approach the first in, first out, would the same workings apply? Very similar. Okay, watch here. My total cost of raw material is 2000. Now, whereas my total equivalent unit for material is only 300. Divide, what do we have there? 6.67 per equivalent unit. Now, by chance, they happen to be the same. Okay, they could be different. Now, conversion cost. My total conversion cost here is 1006 and equivalent unit is 289. 1006 over 289 tells me that my equivalent or my cost per equivalent unit is going to be $5.54. Great, right? So that's a huge part of the question done. Now, if I know my cost per equivalent unit, I'm able to further do one more calculation. What is that? Can I find out what is my total cost per kilo? Can I? Yes, I can. Because if I know that my material cost is going to be 667 per equivalent unit, and I knew that my conversion cost is 5.85 per equivalent unit, I can just simply add the two of them up. And yes, this immediately becomes my total cost per kilo. But this is applicable only for weighted average cost. How much is that, do you have? $12.52. Now observe here, if I could do this for weighted average cost, why not I do the same for this? First in, first out. What would be the total cost per kilo? Same thing, 667 plus 5.8, apologies, 5.54. Now that would give you $12.21. Do you notice that for first in, first out and weighted average, the cost per unit, cost per kilo is exactly different? Okay? Right, and you know that they are different because first in, first out, unlike weighted average, first in, first out actually differentiates between those units completed last period, those units partially completed last period, and then it differentiates from those additional costs you incur in the current period. However, for weighted average, you don't care about the distinction between last period done and what is completed this period, and what is started and completed this period. Okay? Now, so then that completes my second part of the example, which is to calculate the cost per equivalent, and I have shown you that. Okay? Now, my ending part of the question is to explain to you part 3. What is part 3? Now, part 3 actually is to explain to you how do we determine the value of my stocks of finished goods and my stocks of work in progress at the end of the period. Okay, so let me very quickly run you through how it's done. Okay, again, I'm going to have the two approaches. Right, just to show you the contrast and the difference, let's start with weighted average. Now for weighted average method, now what we do is that for weighted average method, like I mentioned again, we do not differentiate between opening and those that are started and completed in this period. Okay? So, how many did I start and complete in this period? Can I bring you back to the example? Total, how many did I finish in this period? 310. Okay, 310. So I have completed in total 310. Okay, and at the cost of how much per kilo? $12.52. So this tells me what is the cost of my completed goods, which is 3881.20. Now, next question. What about closing work in progress? Okay. Now, I find that at the end of the period, I have 50 kilos of remaining work in progress, and these are 100% complete with regards to raw material and 30% complete with regards to conversion costs. Okay, observe that, huh? Okay, so my closing work in progress comprises of two components. First, the raw material component, and next, the conversion cost component. Add the two together, that becomes the value of your closing work in progress. Okay, how much is your raw material? Okay, it's going to be $6.67 per equivalent unit. So 6.67 multiplied by how many kilos of closing work in progress? 50 kilos. And to what percentage of completion? 100%. Plus, okay, my conversion cost per equivalent unit is 5.85. Now, how many kilos are there for the closing work in progress? It's 50 kilos. And what percentage of closing work in progress and in terms of conversion cost is complete? 30%. So 50 kilos times 30%, because it's only 30% complete in terms of conversion cost. Now, adding up these calculations, this will get you 421.25. And you know that the total of your completed units and closing work in progress gets you 4302.45. Okay? And again, there is no distinction between opening work in progress and those that are like started and completed in this period. Okay? Let us complete with the first in first out method. Now for first in first out method, the difference is, as I mentioned, we actually make a distinction between the opening work in progress and also those that are started and completed in this period. Okay, so let us start with the opening work in progress. Your opening work in progress had materials $400, 100% complete, conversion cost $300, 60% complete. So in other words, the opening work in progress is worth 400 plus 300. Okay? Now this opening work in progress had a slight issue. That issue was that it was only 60% complete in terms of conversion cost, which means that it needs a further 40% to complete. Okay? So we have to take 40% times 60 kilos. 40% times 60 kilos. Now, what is the cost per equivalent unit for raw materials? As you can see here, $6.67. Okay, great. Now with this, now what you need to do, oh apologies, it's not 667, it's 5.45. 5.54, apologies. Okay, because the opening work in progress was incomplete only with regards to conversion cost, not raw materials, conversion cost. Now what you need to do next is that sum up all these, okay, and multiply whatever. You should get 832.96. So that means that your opening work in progress, which is 60 kilos, after they are complete, they are worth $832.96. Okay? And these are completed. Now those started and completed in this period, how many kilos are there? Do you remember what I've written here? 250 kilos. Right. Now, how much is the cost per kilo? Can you see here? Cost per kilo is $12.21. 250 times 12.21, that gets you total cost of 3052.50. Okay, next, what about the closing work in progress? How much are they worth? Okay, quite simple. Your closing work in progress is 100% complete in terms of raw materials, 30% complete in terms of conversion costs. There are 50 kilos of closing work in progress. So what do you need to do? Okay, 50 kilos multiplied by 100% times your material cost of 667 plus, okay, so this is the material part. So conversion part, conversion cost is how many percent complete? 30% complete, and the cost per equivalent unit for conversion cost is $5.54. And what you do is that you solve for this, that gets you 416.60. Apologies, 60. Now once you have done this, okay, very good, you can just total up. It tells you what's your total cost of production. Now you notice that the figure, strange, it looks very familiar, isn't it? Looks quite close, but not exactly the same. Okay, they did not be the same anyway. Now with that, I have explained to you, very important, how do you address the issue of process costing involving opening work in progress. Okay, now the choice of method, whether it's weighted average or first in first out, is crucial because that determines how much your closing work in progress will be valued at. Yes, and of course, at this point in time, you are probably wondering, then why is it that there are people who want to use weighted average? Why some use first in first out? Okay, to very quickly answer that question, and then we will end, is that the reason why we use first in first out is because this results in more current stock values. Reason being that the earlier stocks are sold first, which means that those that are left over are the more recent stocks, and it gives you a more realistic and more up-to-date stock value. Okay, whilst weighted average cost method has this issue that since all the costs are averaged over all units, you do not really have clarity about what is the more current stock value. Okay, of course the benefit of weighted average cost method is that it ensures that your stock values do not fluctuate too much. In fact, the truth is that if you use first in first out, chances are your stock values may increase and decrease substantially because of maybe shortages or because of price hikes, whereas weighted average method is unlikely to be affected by sudden increase in stock prices or sudden drops in unit stock prices. So that's the reason why some businesses may use first in first out, some may use weighted average, and it also depends on the nature of the product. If you're talking about electronic products, obviously first in first out would be a preferred method, while on the other hand, if you're talking about something that is homogeneous, something like grain, wheat, and maybe you talk about barley, agricultural produce, those where every unit that you purchase, they are identical, then weighted average cost method would be a lot more applicable. Alright, so I hope that gives you some insight on like why we have two different methods of what you call that, determining closing work in progress values. Okay, so the example should help you a lot in understanding how we address this so-called issue of addressing, your opening work in progress and how does it affect your closing work in progress, right? Okay, so that's one very good example for you. I hope that had shed more light on this while you also try to do your self-study and understand how it is done. Alright, now, so that should give you enough foundation to attempt the exercises given to you in the lecture notes. I hope that helps. Now, if you have any issues still, do drop me an email, right? You have my email address. If not, you can drop me an email on Blackboard, right? I'll reply to you anyway. Okay, have a good day meantime, and all the best for your assignment, and I'll see you soon in the coming lesson. Right, have a good day.